Do you know how they say that history is often far stranger than fiction? Well, that's totally true. Every now and then, we trip over events so bizarre and unsettling they make even the wildest conspiracy theories seem basic. Some of these moments sound less like actual history and more like a high-fever dream, like something Salvador Dali would have painted if he dabbled in storytelling instead of melting clocks. From entire towns dancing themselves into exhaustion to wars where birds outsmarted humans, these events are so absurd they'll make you question everything you thought you knew. So buckle up. This is history at its weirdest. Let's start off with number 15, the Great Emu War of Australia. Yes, Australia really went to war with birds and lost. In 1932, farmers in Western Australia were under siege, not by foreign invaders, but by an army of 20,000 emus, storming through farmland like tiny, flightless Mongol hordes. These oversized, feathered menaces trampled crops, devoured grain, and made a complete mockery of human defenses. Desperate, the government sent in soldiers armed with Lewis machine guns. It should have been an easy victory. Spoiler, it wasn't. Turns out, emus are absolute units. They dodged bullets, scattered into smaller groups to avoid fire, and outran the soldiers' vehicles. One gun even jammed mid-attack, leaving troops flailing in frustration. After weeks of failed ambushes, thousands of bullets wasted, and the birds still thriving, officials called off the war. The final score? Emus. 1, Australia, 0. The Emu War remains a legendary reminder that nature doesn't always lose. Sometimes it straight up clowns you. Number 14, the Battle of the Herrings. A battle fought over fish? Yep. In 1429, during the 100 Years' War, English troops were escorting a massive shipment of salted herring to their army besieging Orléans. French forces, desperate to disrupt the supply line, ambushed the convoy. The English, led by Sir John Fastolf, did what any self-respecting commander would do. They weaponized the fish. Using barrels of herring as makeshift barricades, the English formed a surprisingly effective fortress. French and Scottish forces, led by Charles of Bourbon, charged repeatedly, but English longbowmen and artillery shredded their ranks. The French lost big time, and the convoy made it safely to Orléans, strengthening the English hold. While the battle itself was no joke, its name, the Battle of the Herrings, makes it sound more like a Monty Python sketch than a major historical event. Still, it proves one thing. In war, sometimes even fish can be a life-saving defense strategy. Number 13. Pope Gregory IX's War on Cats. What do you do when you suspect cats might be secretly working for Satan? If you were Pope Gregory IX in the 1200s, you declare war on them. His papal bull, Vox in Rama, labeled black cats as demonic creatures, kicking off a mass extermination of felines across Europe. The result? A nightmare-level rat infestation. With fewer cats around to control the rodent population, rats thrived and brought their good friend bubonic plague along for the ride. The Black Death wiped out nearly 25 million people in Europe, making this one of the worst decisions in history. Historians debate just how much the cat massacre contributed to the spread of the plague, but it's a classic case of unintended consequences. Fear and superstition drove a decision that arguably made everything worse. So next time you see a black cat crossing your path, maybe thank it instead of blaming it for bad luck. Number 12. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919. Molasses. Slow, sticky, and completely harmless, right? Not if 2.3 million gallons of it suddenly decide to go rogue. On January 15, 1919, a gigantic storage tank in Boston's North End exploded, sending a 35-mile-per-hour wave of syrup crashing through the streets. Buildings crumpled like paper, cars were flattened, and people literally drowned in molasses. The flood reached 25 feet high, killing 21 people and injuring 150 others. Rescuers waded through the thick, suffocating mess, struggling to find survivors as the molasses hardened. The city smelled like a giant pancake for months. Turns out the tank had been poorly constructed. Its owners even painted it brown to hide leaks. The disaster led to huge reforms in industrial safety laws. Today, the Great Molasses Flood stands as a sticky, tragic, and absurd reminder that even something as simple as syrup can be dangerous under the right, or very wrong, conditions. Number 11. The Great Moon Hoax of 1835. In the 1830s, people were obsessed with space, so when the New York Sun reported that astronomer Sir John Herschel had discovered life on the moon, folks lost their minds. According to the paper, Herschel's new telescope had spotted lush landscapes, unicorns, humanoid bat creatures, and even bipedal beavers. It was the most insane scientific discovery of all time. Except, it was all a massive lie. Journalist Richard Adams Locke had completely made it up to poke fun at both scientific speculation and gullible readers. But people believed it. Hard. For weeks, the public marveled at the supposed Moon Men civilization. By the time the hoax was exposed, the New York Sun had already gained a ton of readers and profits. The Great Moon Hoax remains one of history's wildest examples of fake news, proof that even in the 1800s, people would fall for a really good sci-fi story. Number 10. The Exploding Whale of Oregon. If you ever think your job is tough, spare a thought for George Thornton. In 1970, the Oregon Highway Division found themselves with a unique problem: a dead, 45-foot sperm whale stranded on the beach, rotting under the sun. Officials decided to use dynamite, because apparently nothing says problem solved like high explosives. The goal? Blow the whale into tiny, scavenger-friendly pieces. The reality? A catastrophic mess. On November 12th, a crowd gathered to witness what would become one of the most spectacular failures in history. The explosion sent massive chunks of whale blubber rocketing through the sky. One piece crushed a car a quarter-mile away. The beach was left in ruins, the smell was unbearable, and the town had more whales to clean up than before. The incident remains an eternal lesson in disaster planning. Just because you can blow something up doesn't mean you should. Number 9. The Dancing Plague of 1518. A party so wild people literally danced to their deaths? Welcome to Strasbourg, 1518. It started innocently enough. A woman named Frau Trophea stepped into the street and began dancing. Hours turned into days, and soon dozens of people joined her. By the end of the month, over 400 people were trapped in an unstoppable marathon dance party from hell. Authorities, convinced they could cure the hot blood causing this madness, made things worse by hiring musicians to encourage the dancers. The result? More exhausted, collapsing bodies. Some literally died from heart attacks, strokes, or sheer exhaustion. Was it ergot poisoning, mass hysteria, or some unexplained supernatural curse? No one knows for sure. What we do know is that the dancing plague remains one of history's weirdest medical mysteries, a time when people couldn't stop moving, and medieval doctors thought the best cure was more dancing. Number 8. The shortest war in history. Imagine preparing for war, only for it to be over before your coffee even gets cold. That's exactly what happened in 1896 when the Anglo-Zanzibar War kicked off and ended in just 38 minutes. After the pro-British Sultan Hamad bin Thawini died, his cousin Khalid bin Bargash took over without British approval. The Brits weren't having it. They issued an ultimatum: step down or else. Khalid, believing he had a fighting chance, barricaded himself in the palace with 2,800 men. The British, never ones for subtlety, responded by shelling the palace with warships. Within minutes, the structure was obliterated. Khalid's forces scattered, and 500 Zanzibaris were dead. Meanwhile, the British suffered just one injury: a single wounded sailor. By 9:45 a.m., it was all over, and Khalid had fled to the German consulate. The Anglo-Zanzibar War remains a hilarious, if brutal, example of just how one-sided colonial conflicts could be. Number 7. The Real Mummy's Curse. Mummy curses sound like something straight out of the Mummy movies, but the legend has real-life roots. In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter unearthed the tomb of King Tutankhamun, and soon after, things got weird. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, died suddenly from an infected mosquito bite, and the media ran wild with the idea of an ancient curse. Newspapers linked every strange death or accident remotely connected to the excavation, claiming the tomb contained an inscription that read, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king." Well, no such inscription existed. In reality, most of Carter's team lived long, healthy lives, and modern studies attribute the deaths to infections, accidents, or pure coincidence. Still, the idea of an ancient Egyptian revenge plot remains way more thrilling than the truth. The Mummy's Curse legend endures as proof that when history meets a good ghost story, the myth usually wins. Number 6. The Miracle of the Sun. On October 13, 1917, an estimated 70,000 people gathered in Fatima, Portugal, expecting to witness something miraculous. And according to witnesses, including journalists who had come to debunk the event, they did. After days of rain, the clouds parted, and the sun began to dance. People reported seeing it zigzag across the sky, radiating vivid colors and seemingly plunging toward the earth. Some panicked, thinking it was the end of the world, while others dropped to their knees in awe. After a few minutes, the sun returned to normal, and strangely, the rain-soaked ground was bone dry. The Catholic Church later recognized it as a miracle, solidifying Fatima as a major pilgrimage site. Skeptics argue it was an optical illusion, mass hysteria, or sun-induced eye strain. But regardless of scientific theories, the miracle of the sun remains one of the most dramatic and widely witnessed supernatural events in history. Number 5. The man who survived both atomic bombs. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was either the luckiest or unluckiest man in history. On August 6, 1945, he was in Hiroshima when the first atomic bomb exploded. Badly burned and temporarily blinded, he survived and, somehow, made his way home to Nagasaki. 3 days later, on August 9th, another atomic bomb hit, and somehow again, Yamaguchi survived. Despite enduring 2 nuclear blasts, he lived to tell the tale, recovering from radiation sickness and going on to live a long life. Rather than dwell in anger or despair, Yamaguchi became a vocal advocate for nuclear disarmament. He spoke at the United Nations, urging world leaders to prevent future nuclear attacks. He passed away in 2010 at the age of 93, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and peace. His story is a testament to the human will to survive, and a sobering reminder of the devastation that nuclear weapons can bring. Number 4. The Phantom Time Hypothesis. What if we told you 300 years of history never actually happened? That's exactly what the Phantom Time Hypothesis claims. Proposed by German historian Heribert Illig in the 1990s, this theory suggests that the years 614 to 911 AD were completely made up. Illig believed Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII, Pope Sylvester II, and Holy Roman Emperor Otto III faked this chunk of time to align their reigns with the year 1000. He pointed to inconsistencies in historical records, a lack of archaeological evidence, and errors in the switch to the Gregorian calendar. Mainstream historians shut this theory down fast. There's extensive physical and astronomical proof that those centuries definitely existed. But the idea of a massive historical cover-up still fascinates conspiracy theorists. While almost certainly nonsense, the phantom time hypothesis proves one thing: history is only as real as the evidence we trust, and some people will question everything. Number 3. The Great Stink of 1858. Londoners in the summer of 1858 suffered. Why? Because the River Thames had essentially turned into a toxic soup of human waste. The heat wave that summer turned the city's already awful sewage problem into a living nightmare. The stench was so bad that Parliament soaked their curtains in lime chloride in a desperate and totally useless attempt to mask the smell. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a full-blown public health crisis. Cholera and typhoid ran rampant, and the government finally realized they couldn't ignore London's failing sewage system any longer. Enter Joseph Bazalgette, an engineer who designed a revolutionary sewer system that redirected waste away from the river. By 1875, London's sanitation dramatically improved, setting the standard for modern urban infrastructure. The Great Stink may have been disgusting, but it forced a much-needed wake-up call that shaped the future of public health. Number 2. Napoleon's Rabbit Attack. Napoleon Bonaparte, conqueror of Europe, mastermind of battle tactics, and helpless against rabbits? Yep. In 1707, after signing the Treaty of Tilsit, he decided to celebrate with a good old-fashioned rabbit hunt. His chief of staff, Alexandre Berthier, gathered hundreds of rabbits, expecting an easy afternoon of target practice. But when the cages were opened, the hunt took an unexpected turn. Instead of running away, the rabbits charged. Why? Because Berthier had mistakenly collected tame rabbits, not wild ones. These fluffy little warriors, raised by humans and expecting food, saw Napoleon as the ultimate buffet. Hopping toward him in a relentless wave, they overwhelmed the emperor and his men. The soldiers tried to shoo them away, but the determined bunnies forced Napoleon into a full-on retreat to his carriage. The moral of the story? No matter how powerful you are, you're never truly safe from an army of hungry rabbits. Number 1. The London Beer Flood of 1814. A 15-foot tidal wave of beer sounds like every pub-goer's dream, except when it's destroying everything in its path. On October 17, 1814, a massive vat at the Moo & Company Brewery in London exploded, unleashing 320,000 gallons of porter. The force was so intense it triggered a domino effect, rupturing additional vats and sending a tsunami of beer barreling through the streets. Homes were demolished, buildings collapsed, and 8 people drowned or were crushed under debris. The flood hit one of London's poorest neighborhoods, trapping residents in cellars and flooding streets with waist-deep beer. Rescue efforts were a nightmare. Imagine wading through sticky pools of ale while inhaling the overwhelming stench of fermented chaos. The brewery was taken to court, but the disaster was ruled an act of God. The London beer flood remains a surreal, tragic reminder that even beer, humanity's best friend, can turn on you in an instant. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.